pedí permiso a nadie, porque yo estoy rompiendo por mi hija. Y la que quiera romper que rompa, y la que quiera quemar que queme, y la que no nos estorbe. Porque antes de que asesinaran a mi hija, han asesinado a muchas. Madre de María de Jesús, Jaimes, Zamudio, que exijo justicia por mí, por mi familia y por mi hija.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Today, we're going to be talking about a case that happened in Mexico, a case that filled Mexico with indignation and terribly affected the victim's family. We're going to be talking about what happened to 19-year-old María de Jesús Jaimes Zamudio and how she lost her life after being thrown out of her apartment window because she refused to be assaulted by two men, and how one of these men is still on the run. It's a case, like I said, that has sparked outrage throughout Mexico, and Maria's mom, Yesenia, has relentlessly continued fighting for justice and has been so vocal about her daughter's murder. I'm going to leave some resources down below regarding some topics that we're going to be covering in the video, such as how to deal with harassment from a superior, from a teacher, from a classmate, and more about femicide. I just want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to today's video. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys are just the best YouTube familia and are so supportive, and you guys help me in spreading awareness. So I really appreciate you guys so much. I also really appreciate the sponsors that help support this channel. So with that, I want to take a few minutes to thank today's sponsor. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's video. You guys, I love Factor so much. They have made my life so much easier, especially right now when I've been super busy catching up on videos, doing my rebrand, launching memberships, and doing all of that. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. There are 35 different meals that you can choose from every week, including Gourmet Plus, Keto, Calorie Smart, Vegan, and Veggie, so you'll always find something that you love that suits your lifestyle. I've tried the Calorie Smart meals before and they were delicious. However, this time I wanted to try the Chef's Choice meals and they were so good. My favorite meal was the queso fundido and ground beef dish, as well as the sun-dried tomato chicken. Factor not only offers ready-to-eat lunches and dinners, but they also offer easy breakfast options, smoothies, and midnight snacks. In fact, Factor has 60 plus add-ons to keep you fueled and focused 24/7. I tried their cold brew latte protein shakes and pretty much had those for breakfast every day for a week. It was just so convenient and calming not having to think about what to cook for breakfast or dinner that week. I love just going to my fridge, grabbing my cold brew shake, grabbing my Factor meal, and then just not even having to think about cooking or doing the dishes. This fall season is the perfect time for you to try out Factor. You can head to factor75.com or click the link down below and use code JackieFlores50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next box of orders. That's code JackieFlores50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. Once again, thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video and for supporting this channel. And with that, let's jump right into today's video. María de Jesús Jaimes Zamudio was born on April 5th, 1996 in Mexico City to her parents Yesenia and Honorio. The two ended up separating, and although I wasn't able to confirm when, I do believe that they remarried later on, but they were still in contact with each other for the sake of their daughters. María had 3 sisters, and her friends and family called her by the nickname Mari Chuy or Mari, and they described her as just being like a normal, happy, extremely studious, and just friendly girl. María grew up attending a Catholic school run by nuns, and one of Maria's childhood friends named Fanny, who they knew each other since they were both like 7 years old, said that she and Maria were part of like many plays recreating biblical passages and that they would spend hours practicing for them together. They were both very involved in the church and they helped organize not only those plays, but also just like other social events and like talks with like younger children to motivate them to get closer to the church. In fact, they were so involved with this that at one point, Fanny says that she and Maria wanted to be nuns when they were older and that they talked about joining the convent one day, but eventually Maria's interest shifted as she was getting older and she kind of let go of that plan. Apart from bonding over their shared faith, Maria and Fanny were in karate as well, and they would practice it in front of Maria's house in the afternoons. Maria was actually very athletic and she did other sports such as swimming, gymnastics, and basketball. Now, basketball is what really won her heart and she just loved playing the sport. She loved the game and she actually wanted to be a part of the Mexican women's team one day. She also liked the color blue a lot lot. She enjoyed reading, going to museums, using her yo-yo, and spending time with her cat named Ginebra. But one of her favorite things to do was celebrating Dia de los Muertos every year in November. Now, Dia de los Muertos, also known as Day of the Dead, is a celebration where like families and friends come together to welcome their loved ones who are returning from the afterlife. It's a really beautiful celebration. If you guys haven't seen the movie Coco, you guys definitely should. It's about Dia de los Muertos, and it kind of just shows what a beautiful holiday and what a beautiful part of our culture this is. And it's a really cute movie, so I would definitely recommend you guys go check it out. But yeah, I mean, Maria loved Dia de los Muertos, especially because she had a lot of nieces and nephews. So she just loved hanging out with them on the holiday, making little candy bags with them, making the ofrenda, and then passing out all of the candy around the neighborhood. I mean, Maria just really loved her family, and she shared on her Facebook bio that they were her biggest inspiration. She dreamt of working hard and being able to take her nieces and nephews to Disneyland and Playa del Carmen, and she even dreamed of getting a house there one day. Her mom, Yesenia, said that Maria told her, quote, "You are going to go live with me, Mom. We'll be together and happy." And that when Maria had kids of her own, her mom would be living with them as well. Honestly, Yesenia and Maria had such a beautiful mother-daughter relationship. I was watching so many interviews with her and like podcasts that she did, and she just speaks so beautifully of her daughter. And I mean, it's not just like her words that describe how beautiful their relationship was. Everyone else also speaks so highly of their bond, and they just were the type of like mother-daughters that would call each other like all day long to give updates about what they were doing, about what their life was like, and stuff like that. So they were just like extremely connected. Yesenia said, honestly, it was impossible to not love Maria. She was so helpful to everyone around her whenever they needed help, and she made sure to give time to her friendships, and she would always remember her friends' birthdays and special occasions and would make them feel special. When time came around to enroll in university, Maria got a scholarship and she began studying at the National Polytechnic Institute in Ticoman, and there she joined the basketball team, and she also participated in cultural events. She also took it upon herself to become more independent, and she ended up getting a job at a movie theater called Cinemex as part of the customer service team to save some money. Her co-worker at Cinemex, Michelle, spoke very fondly of her and said that she was just so sincere and just incredibly kind despite having to deal with like some rude customers during rush hours. Even though these customers were like rude and like obviously angsty, Maria was always trying to cheer the customers up and just make the best out of those kind of situations. So just to recap, Maria was studying, she was playing basketball at the university, and she was going to work. Her plate was full, but she managed all of this so well, and she eventually saved up enough money to move out to an apartment with 3 other university student roommates. She now had more freedom to go out as she pleased, and she would spend her time with her friends doing, typical college things such as partying and drinking. But her friend Fanny, the one that I mentioned earlier, said that yes, Maria enjoyed doing all of that, of course, just like any other young adult, but that she didn't go out that often. So it's not like Maria was like this big party girl who was like constantly drinking and like doing all this stuff. She was just like a typical college student who enjoyed going out after a long week of school. At first, things seemed to be going well until Maria ran into some struggles with her grades and was failing in some of her classes. But she was determined to get her grades back up and just get back on track. Unfortunately, to make matters worse, one of her teachers in particular, named Julio Ivan Ruiz Guerrero, began making inappropriate comments to Maria instead of actually helping her. Instead of offering her like extra credit or like an extra project to do or like tutoring or anything like that, he would instead insinuate passing her in her classes in exchange for sexual favors. In one conversation that Julio had with Maria on Facebook, he said, quote, "Do you accept fornication or cuerpo matic?" Which is basically his way of asking if Maria can pay up with her body. To which Maria was shocked, and she replied saying that she didn't understand what he was saying, and Julio just kind of like laughed it off and said, "Nothing, forget about it." And the conversation continued with Maria asking him a school-related question. I'm sure Maria was so confused reading that from her teacher and just shocked. I would be too if I was in her position. I think when comments are made that way, you can kind of like second guess yourself and be like, wait, is that actually what they meant? Am I overreacting? Am I reading too deep into this? I mean, it can be hard to like accept that you were harassed just through words. Maria told her mom about them, but it wasn't only Julio though. Since Maria's major was made up of mainly men, she was facing these type of comments frequently. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but her major was engineering. So there was just a lot of men in her classes, and there were these two other boys who were also harassing Maria as well. Two classmates named Mario and Gabriel, which we will get to shortly. Yesenia remembers just telling Maria, quote, "Leave that school already." I mean, she was just so frustrated at the fact that these men were harassing her daughter, and she didn't want Maria to have to deal with this anymore. Maria was having such a hard time with this, but she did her best to focus on herself, on her friends, on her family, and just focus on trying to get her grades back up by studying extremely hard. Unfortunately, the situation didn't get better. At around 4 a.m. on January 16th, 2016, Maria's mom Yesenia got a devastating phone call. The person on the other line told her, quote, "Mari had an accident, she fell, and she's in the hospital." Can you imagine suddenly being woken up at that hour and hearing that your daughter is hurt and in the hospital? I mean, my heart would be in my stomach, and I just can't imagine what Yesenia was feeling at that moment. Yesenia had literally spoken to Maria only hours before this terrible phone call. They actually had plans to go eat lunch together, but at the last minute, the plans changed, and Maria told her mom that she was going to have dinner at Chili's with some of her friends, and then later updated her telling her that she was going to go to karaoke after. Yesenia was thinking, like, what could have happened from when I last spoke to my daughter to now? How did this night go from her going to Chili's into a karaoke bar with her friends to now her being in the hospital? Yesenia's mind was going through all sorts of possibilities. She didn't even get the name of the other person on the phone. She just quickly hung up the phone, contacted Maria's father, Honorio, and the two of them rushed to Maria's apartment to see if they could figure out what was going on, but no one was there. After that, they went to various different hospitals in the area, but they couldn't find her. They kept looking and looking, and when they finally found Maria, they realized that Maria was admitted to the hospital with incorrect information, such as her age, and she was also admitted without a name. That's why it was so difficult to find her. Now, unfortunately, that was the least of their concern. Yesenia and Honorio saw a terrible sight at the hospital. Maria was in a coma. She had tubes all over her body, and the doctors told them that Maria had severe fractures in her legs, hips, skull, and even had a perforated lung. Doctors told them that Maria was brain dead and that there was most likely nothing that they would be able to do for her. So what on earth happened? I mean, how did Maria fall? Well, doctors only knew what had happened based on what paramedics said because Maria arrived at the hospital alone. No one was with her. Yesenia was like, wait, but she was out with a group of people. Like, what do you mean she's alone? Like, no one helped her? She just couldn't believe that her daughter had been alone in the hospital the entire time. The paramedics said that she suffered a fall from her apartment, which was on the 5th floor, but that's all the information that they had. According to a paramedic that arrived on scene to take Maria to the hospital, there were around like 20 people just standing around Maria, observing her as she was struggling, and no one offered to go with her in the ambulance or anything. And of course, the people she was with were nowhere to be found, so no one even really knew her name. This made Yesenia really mad. Now, just a side note, I don't know where the 3 roommates were in the aftermath, but from the interviews and the reports, it seems like they also just like disappeared because, again, when Yesenia and Honorio arrived to Maria's apartment, it was empty, so the roommates were obviously gone. At this point, Yesenia and Honorio just couldn't even focus on asking for more information or just really focus on anything other than Maria, who was in a really bad condition, and the hospital that she was at just like wasn't attending to her properly, so her parents decided to transfer her to a better hospital. Yesenia went to social media to ask everyone for help covering the cost of Maria's surgeries and of her care and said, quote, "The contribution of each one of you is important, even if it's just 10 pesos. Your help is very important. It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. If you don't have the resources, a prayer to God for her health is well received. She needs you today more than ever, just as she was there all the time for us." The next few days were just absolutely horrifying, and unfortunately, 8 days later, Maria gave her last breath at the hospital and passed away. She never got to say what happened to her. She never got to say goodbye to her parents, to her sisters, to her family. She didn't get to give anyone one final hug. She was gone forever. It didn't feel real to Yesenia. The doctor said that if Maria had been taken to the hospital sooner, then she would probably still be alive and would be able to tell everyone what truly happened. The doctor said that when Maria arrived at the hospital, she was semi-naked and the little clothes that she had left on were torn and also had missing buttons. She also had no shoes on. Why did Maria arrive at the hospital in that state, and why did she arrive alone? Well, there at the hospital, some of the girls who were there with Maria that night that she fell went to give Yesenia and Honorio her belongings, such as her cell phone, her purse, and things like that. They said that Maria wanted to end her life, so she threw herself from her apartment window. Again, Maria's apartment was on the 5th floor, and the fall was around 12 meters or like 39 feet. Yesenia and Honorio couldn't even process what they were hearing. Like, what these girls were saying just sounded like complete nonsense to them. At this moment, Yesenia and Honorio only had that version of events, that Maria took her own life by throwing herself out the window. But her parents weren't buying it whatsoever. They knew Maria would never do such a thing. I mean, they never saw Maria show any sign of depression or and she never took any type of medication. And I know that sometimes this can be hidden, and just because a family member doesn't see a sign or like anything like that doesn't mean that a person isn't thinking about, taking their own life. But the family just truly felt like this story had no credibility. Not only did they think that Maria didn't do this, but the doctors were telling the family that her injuries just didn't coincide with suicide. Plus, with Maria arriving at the hospital semi-naked and her clothes being ripped and her shoes off and everything, it was all pointing to something more. Unfortunately, going back to Maria's apartment to find answers wouldn't be very helpful, because after the ambulance took Maria to the hospital, the police who remained on site at Maria's apartment didn't close off the area for forensic testing or anything like that. They didn't even inform other authorities to begin forensic proceedings or do anything like that. It was revealed that inside her apartment, there were locks of Maria's hair left in her apartment bedroom. And I mean, this shocked everyone. I mean, how hard do you have to pull someone's hair to pull out chunks of it? Extremely hard. Her shoes were also found, and they were very, very dirty, appearing as if Maria had been dragged. There could have also been other possible evidence that could have been found at the apartment and tested, but unfortunately, like I said, the apartment wasn't closed off. I mean, Maria's roommates were like moving around the apartment after this happened. They were continuing with their life. Maria's family members were also coming and going from the apartment, so they also could have possibly ruined or like tainted any evidence. Now, as I mentioned, Maria's family was not buying the story of her taking her own life. They knew that something more had happened. However, authorities accepted the first version of events that they were told, and they just classified her case as a suicide, and that was it. Case closed. Can you believe that? Authorities simply ignored the state that Maria arrived in the hospital in. I mean, they ignored what the doctors were saying about her injuries not coinciding with suicide. And they also ignored the locks of hair found at Maria's apartment, possibly indicating that a fight happened between Maria and someone who maybe pushed her out the window. I mean, the family were just shocked that police weren't listening to what they had to say. It was just extremely frustrating because they're like, dude, like, we know our family member, we know them so well, and we just know that this wasn't a suicide. They continued to push back on this, and thankfully, inconsistencies with the suicide theory shown through her autopsy and interviews made authorities reopen Maria's case and reclassify it as a manslaughter, meaning an unintentional homicide, which was a step in the right direction, but Yesenia was still adamant that all of the evidence pointed to a 100% intentional homicide. So let's talk about the inconsistencies that made authorities change their mind. Police began by interviewing the people Maria was last with to create a reconstruction of her last night alive. Authorities knew that Maria told her mom that she was going to go out to Chili's and then to a karaoke bar after, and with the help from Maria's family and through Maria's cell phone records, they were able to track down exactly who she was last with. She was with 2 female classmates, with her 3 roommates who were at the apartment, with another classmate named Gabriel Eduardo, the one who I mentioned earlier, who was also harassing Maria at school, and finally with her teacher, Julio Ivan. So all of these people were questioned, and Yesenia says that everyone had just like a different version of events. The main story that they all repeated, however, was that Maria was having a great time throughout the night and that she even invited them back to her apartment to continue having fun. But when they got there, they state that all of a sudden Maria, quote, went crazy, and that this just happened out of nowhere and that she took her own life by jumping out of the window. Again, all out of nowhere. Another person that also spoke with Yesenia was another classmate named Mario Julio Alberto, who gave Yesenia a surprisingly detailed version of events despite him not even being there the night that Maria died, which made Yesenia really suspicious. If you recall at the beginning of the video, I mentioned him already. He was one of the other people harassing Maria. He wanted a romantic relationship with her, but she refused, and he would literally harass her over this. So now he's going to Maria's mom telling her what happened the night Maria died, yet he wasn't even there. It just doesn't even make sense. Why are you speaking on something that you don't even know about? Now, he told Yesenia that Maria had depression and that she took her own life by jumping out of the window, again, out of nowhere, just like the 7 other people testified. At this point, Yesenia was thinking what do you even know? You weren't even there. She said, quote, all 7 declared the same thing, but the expert reports that were done in the case and the witnesses show that they are lying. Maria's sister gave Blanca Gomez, an agent from the prosecutor's office, information and proof about the harassment that Maria was receiving from these same people her sister was last with. There was more that needed to be looked into in Maria's death, and her family was trying to get authorities to realize this. She provided screenshots from conversations between Maria and Julio, and then screenshots of conversations between Maria and Gabriel, showing this harassment, and then also reiterated that Mario was also harassing her sister. And the fact that he was giving details from the night that Maria fell was very suspicious, and the family was saying that he could possibly also have something to do with the situation. The family just thought it was really odd that 3 people who were harassing Maria and just being absolutely terrible to her were the last people she was with the night that she died, and all had the same story of she jumped out the window. Authorities were requesting video footage from Chili's and from the karaoke bar, but Chili's says that their recordings were erased after 15 days, and the karaoke bar said that they did not have surveillance cameras. So authorities really had no way of knowing exactly how Maria was interacting with these people, if she was even having fun with them, if she even wanted to be there in the first place. I mean, it was really hard for them to pinpoint when something went south throughout the night or what really happened. Not only did all of this put together make authorities reopen Maria's case, but a poorly done autopsy did as well. The autopsy determined that Maria had DNA from 2 people underneath her nails, coincidentally from her teacher Julio Ivan and from her classmate Gabriel Eduardo. These 2 who were the last people with her and who were also harassing her at school, I mean, what a coincidence. To authorities, this meant that Maria tried grabbing onto Julio or Gabriel as she was falling or being pushed out the window, leaving scratches on their arm, which Maria's family actually visibly saw later for themselves. So yeah, they had scratches on their arms, their DNA was under her fingernails, of course everything was just pointing to Gabriel and Julio. The autopsy also determined that Maria fell on her feet, not head first through the window, and then to finish it off, the autopsy concluded the same thing as the hospital, that Maria's death was not a suicide but a homicide. They determined she died from visceral and tissue alterations caused by traumatic brain injury. Although these were informative findings, Yesenia said her daughter's autopsy was poorly done, and it just really infuriated her. I mean, the first issue she had is that the autopsy lasted only 45 minutes and was missing basic requirements such as specifying the number of people who were in contact with her body, detailing any injuries and marks found throughout her body, and there was also no test done to determine if Maria suffered sexual abuse before her death. The forensics also determined for themselves that there was simply no need for other testing done on her body, which 100% should have been done, taking into consideration the background of Maria's death. So yeah, the family was just really disappointed with the autopsy, and they just wish that further testing had been done. Now, neighbors were also interviewed about what they witnessed that night, and their statements contradicted the stories of those last with Maria. With all of these interviews and statements from the people Maria was last with, and witnesses and phone records and the autopsy, investigators were finally able to make a reconstruction of the events that occurred the night Maria died. So, what happened? Well, according to a post made by one of Maria's sisters, this is what happened. Some articles are stating it a little bit differently. Some articles state that Maria showed up to Chili's thinking she was just going to meet with her classmates and with her friends, but then she was surprised to see Julio and Gabriel show up, and she was uncomfortable with them being there. However, I'm just going based off what her own sister said. So her sister began explaining how there were 4 people responsible for the death of her sister: Maria's teacher, Julio Ivan, her classmate, Gabriel Eduardo, and 2 other female classmates who were out with Maria that night. Maria's sister wrote, quote, "These 4 murderers are the masterminds behind your death. They took it upon themselves to defame you and say that it was a suicide but here I am to tell the world what happened. She said that the night of January 15th, Julio invited Maria out to celebrate a fellow student finishing their thesis. She said Maria met the group at Chili's, where Gabriel also was, and that after dinner and a few beers there, they all went to a karaoke bar and left at around 2:45 in the morning. The moment that they left the karaoke bar, Maria's nightmare began. Maria was drugged, and according to witnesses at the bar, Maria stated that she wanted to take a taxi home, but Julio insisted that he should take her home in his truck because she was too drunk, which Gabriel was actually driving his car, and the two other female classmates were also getting a ride from Julio. So with that, Maria accepted the ride, and during the ride back to her apartment, she was groped by Julio and Gabriel, and she tried getting out of the car and she tried escaping, and she actually did manage to exit the car, but Gabriel and Julio grabbed her and then forced her back in, claiming that they couldn't let her go home by herself for safety reasons. Eventually, they all arrived at Maria's apartment, and according to a couple of neighbors who actually saw this go down, they saw Julio and Gabriel holding Maria down while they opened up her apartment, and Maria was shouting for help and saying, leave me alone, and things like that. The two female classmates that were also in the car stayed downstairs while Julio and Gabriel took Maria into her apartment. Maria was still screaming and asking for help, but her three roommates, who were home at the time, didn't come out to help her or even see what was going on. The roommates testified that they did hear knocking on their bedroom doors, but that they didn't open up because they thought that someone had broken into the apartment and they were scared. Julio and Gabriel then took Maria into her bedroom and they tried assaulting her. Maria was fighting back, and a neighbor named Rosa heard commotion, and she actually went to go knock on the apartment door to see what was going on because, I mean, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and people are shouting and there's a girl saying, leave me alone. It's obviously a scary situation. So she went to go knock on the door, and Gabriel went to open it while Julio stayed in the bedroom with Maria, guarding the door so that she couldn't get out. Rosa saw the situation and she just knew that something was wrong, so she actually called the police, but unfortunately they didn't arrive in time. When Gabriel came back to the bedroom, they continued fighting with Maria and possibly pulled out chunks of her hair during this fight. Also, this could be when Maria's shoes became like scuffed and dirty and were taken off. Maria continued to defend herself, and she saw no other way to escape but through the window. According to an interview done with Maria's mother, she says that her daughter was up against the window, like holding on to the windowsill, as she was continuing to fight with the two men and shouting at them to leave her alone. After Gabriel and Julio realized that they weren't going to get what they came for, they pushed Maria out of the bedroom window, and Maria dug her nails into them as she was being pushed. Yesenia says that she is sure that the two men forcibly removed Maria's hands, where she was gripping herself against the windowsill, and pushed her. A couple of neighbors saw this happen and said that it was clear Maria did not jump, that she was actually trying to get away from the window to avoid being pushed. After Maria fell, everyone fled, leaving Maria lying helpless and injured on the concrete. Neighbors were the ones who actually called the police. Maria's sister also said that the roommates coincidentally turned out to be friends of both Julio and Gabriel, which to her makes it obvious as to why they were acting oblivious. I mean, they were friends with these two men, and maybe that's why they pretended to not open the door. So that is what the sister wrote about what happened to Maria that horrific day. Authorities state the same thing, that Julio and Gabriel were trying to assault Maria, and after not getting what they wanted, they threw her out of the window to silence her. I mean, remember, her clothes were torn and she arrived at the hospital with no shoes and was semi-naked, so it does match up. Yesenia knew Maria's death was not a manslaughter, not an intentional homicide, but an aggravated femicide. There were a total of 7 people at the apartment with her daughter that day. I mean, we have the teacher Julio, her classmate Gabriel, the 2 other female students who were downstairs, and the 3 roommates in her apartment. I mean, it's insane that all these people were there. I mean, besides, of course, Julio and Gabriel, and that no one stepped in to help Maria. Yesenia said, quote, all 7 declared the same thing, but the expert reports that were done on this case and the witnesses show that they are lying. I mean, the roommates were saying that Maria went crazy crazy out of nowhere and like jumped out the window. Yet in another statement, they said that they didn't even open their bedroom doors because they thought that there was an intruder. So how did they know that Maria went crazy and jumped out by herself? There was just like so many inconsistencies with the other 7 people. Like at one point they were saying like, oh, she fell, or oh no, she had depression and took her own life, or oh yeah, she just like jumped because she was crazy. Like those are just some examples of the type of like inconsistent statements that everyone was making. Unfortunately, even with the DNA evidence and with the eyewitness statements, Julio and Gabriel were not arrested, and Julio even continued teaching at the university. Yeah, this guy was still a teacher. It was just absolutely infuriating to Yesenia and to the entire family. Yesenia actually went to social media to show her frustration, and she joined the movement Ni Una Menos and participated in numerous marches to keep her daughter's case in the public eye. I mean, she just didn't understand how these people were just like out and about living their life and they were free, yet there was literally physical evidence linking them to her daughter's death. Yesenia began focusing on activism, and she was not going to stop until the people responsible were behind bars. After joining Ni Una Menos and being so vocal, Yesenia was being laughed at, and she actually received a lot of hate and like threats from the public, from the family members of the suspects, from people, and she was just like so shocked at this type of reaction. She said, quote, "They have threatened us with death several times and made attempts on our lives for demanding justice. Marichui's father suffered a deep depression, her grandmother suffered a stroke, and I lost my job. That is what it means in Mexico to live without justice and to also be criminalized. My daughter's classmates would come to my Facebook wall and my social media to tell me that I was crazy, that my daughter was a drug addict, that she had killed because of me, and that I was a bad mother." It's definitely hard to hear what Yesenia was going through. Like, it's insane that she was receiving this type of backlash. She, at the time, worked in the financial department for a car agency, but she actually lost her job because she had to miss work to go to like court hearings and like attend marches and things like that. So losing her job added to all of the stress and injustice that she was feeling. Yesenia was also disappointed with how Maria's school was reacting to the death of one of her students at the hands of one of their teachers, and the fact that Julio was still even teaching there despite all of this and the proof of him harassing Maria. In February of 2020, during a march held for Ingrid Escamilla, a 25-year-old woman who was murdered and cut into pieces by her partner, Yesenia actually was there, and she gave a really powerful speech about Maria, demanding justice and stating that the government lacks resources and that she wasn't going to hold back until her daughter got justice. Now, I will say that this video did create some controversy because in her discourse, she mentions burning and breaking things to get her point across and shows the anger she feels for not getting any help from the government, which many people didn't agree with, since they believe that fighting fire with more fire only makes matters worse and would paint their movements in a negative light and distract everyone from their true intentions, which is to end gender violence. So some people felt like she was being a little bit too harsh, while others agree that their voices won't be heard unless they show anger and say that they would be doing the same thing if they were in Yesenia's position and if they also lost their precious loved ones and just weren't getting justice. Yesenia actually spoke out about this controversy briefly in a podcast interview with Adela Mica, which I will link down below for you guys if you guys want to listen to it. She says that she knows the backlash her video created, but she said that she was referring to burning and destroying once and for all the system that doesn't do anything to save more lives. You know, the system that lets murderers roam free when she literally lost her daughter at their hands that can kill more women. In August of 2020, Maria's case was reclassified again, this time as an intentional homicide. Again, it was a step in the right direction, but Yesenia was still fighting for her daughter's case to be officially classified as a femicide. 5 years after Maria's death in January of 2021, her case was reclassified again, this time as an aggravated femicide. Now, the next step was getting the arrest warrants for those involved in Maria's death. In the meantime, they were all still free and just like living their life as usual as they've been for the past 5 years. In March of 2021, Yesenia filed a complaint with the National Human Rights Commission where she accused Maria's school personnel of violating human rights. The commission found that Maria was indeed harassed by her teacher and by some of her classmates, and that the school did not properly investigate or do anything to help find those responsible after Maria's murder. So the commission ordered Maria's school to quickly address the damage by providing psychological and grief support to Maria's family. The commission also determined that the investigation in Maria's case was not the only recent one to have errors and to be poorly done, but they also found some serious mistakes in the investigation of over 50 cases. The commission also offered Maria's school to give Yesenia Maria's posthumous diploma as part of the damage repairs. In the meantime, finally, after 5 years after Maria's death, the arrest warrants for Julio and Gabriel were released on September 19th, 2021. This decision came after the public prosecutor's office presented sufficient evidence to support both of their involvement in Maria's death. A red notice was also issued by Interpol for Julio and Gabriel's capture in over 140 countries. So now basically everyone was just waiting for them to be found. Now, real quick, going back to the complaint that Yesenia made about the school was basically forced into a public apology, which they made on January 24th, 2022. Present at the public apology was Maria's family, as well as the president of the National Human Rights Commission, María del Rosario, and Federico Anaya, the school's lawyer. Federico acknowledged that when Maria's death occurred, the school did lack the effective mechanisms to protect victims of gender violence and admitted that the institution's responses to the authorities could have been clearer. Federico said that the school's apology would be meaningless unless changes were made. So with that, the school established the Polytechnic Unit for Gender Perspective and created protocols to prevent, address, and sanction gender violence. The school also said that they will be creating a special chair dedicated to researching and discussing gender violence in Maria's name. To this, Yesenia accepted the apology and said, quote, "Today I accept this apology from the IPN, but I accept it with Mari Chui murdered, but with her by my side and together with many women and men who have accompanied me in these 6 years, so that today her murderers have arrest warrants issued. I accept the apology, but together with Mari Chui and all the murdered girls, young women, and women, I thank this school and beg you to allow your students to dream and achieve what Mari Chui could not. It is your power, duty, and obligation to ensure that what happened is not repeated and to guarantee that there is not one more murdered." There was also a minute of silence held in memory of Maria, and there was a PowerPoint with photos of Maria played as well. Yesenia spoke out during this time and also said that Maria would have been turning 25 years old in a few days and that her daughter will never get the chance to finish her degree, to play basketball again. She'll never be able to become a mother one day and have a family, and she'll just never get to grow up and be a successful Mexican woman like she dreamed. She won't get the chance to do any of that. She said she knows that the apology by the school was only made because of the order of the National Human Rights Commission, but she is still satisfied that they did apologize to her, but she hopes that they don't just stop there and that they actually do the things that they're saying they're going to do. She said, quote, "My daughter was harassed by a teacher. He failed her and ended up murdering her. My daughter was a girl who dedicated herself to studying, playing sports, and reading, and she was living her youth. She was a normal, happy, fulfilled girl with many projects and many life plans. She was in the middle of her career and she was going to graduate. She had plans to travel and get a master's degree. In the future, she had plans to get married. She had a very broad vision of her life, and her murderers have to pay. They should be in jail and it shouldn't take long." In June of 2022, there was a reward offered for any information leading to their arrest. I mean, at this point, these guys were still on the run. They were offering 500,000 pesos for each, which is around 25,000 US dollars. Unfortunately, it wasn't until nearly 8 years after Maria's death in October of 2023 that the first arrest was finally made. Gabriel, Maria's classmate, was actually arrested in Campeche and transported back to Mexico City. Gabriel did try to appeal his arrest, but the judge rejected it and stated that there's no appeal that can prevent the arrest for such a serious crime like femicide. I mean, this was great news for Yesenia and for the rest of the family and for everyone who was in their corner. This was a giant step forward in their fight for justice, and they just felt so happy knowing that he was finally arrested. Unfortunately, Julio was still nowhere to be found. He fled and to this day has not been located. Again, I will put down below some information on how you can contact authorities if you believe you have any information regarding his whereabouts. So we will see what happens with Gabriel in his legal proceedings, as well as any other arrest in the case, whether it's arresting Julio or the others possibly involved in Maria's death. So I will definitely make sure to update you guys either through a pinned comment, which I will put down below, or I'll just do it in like a future case update video. That being said, Yesenia is still fighting for justice and she is still being so vocal about her daughter's death. I'm going to link down below a petition petition that they have created, which demands that the authorities clarify the circumstances of Maria's death and punish all those responsible. It also urges Maria's school to implement more safety protocols and to speak out for female students who have been murdered, harassed, attacked, or are missing. As of today, this is where things stand. Sadly, Maria is gone forever, but her spirit will always remain in her loved ones' hearts. Yesenia always recalls just how beautiful she was and just all the beautiful moments that they shared, saying, quote, "You always carried us in your heart, and not a day went by without you reminding me, Mother, I love you. You'd say that every morning. How could I forget you? You live on in my heart. How could I forget when I miss you so much?" After Gabriel's arrest, Yesenia was so full of hope. She believes justice will be served and vowed not to rest until it is. While I wasn't able to find full details about Maria's funeral, we can only hope that she was laid to rest peacefully and surrounded by all of her loved ones. On July 7th, 2022, Maria's posthumous diploma was given to Yesenia, and she reiterated that the school needs to do better and demanded that the campus implements more safety so that no other student has to experience what her daughter did. It's just truly admirable and empowering to see Yesenia strengthen this fight for justice and in keeping Maria's name alive, and I just hope that she and all of Maria's loved ones are able to heal one day. What happened to Maria is just absolutely horrific. It's so unfair, and she just deserved more. So again, I just hope that Julio is caught and that all of those responsible for her death are held accountable. As I said, I will keep you guys posted on this, but thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to what happened to Maria. I would love to know what you guys think about this down below, and if there are any other cases that you would like me to cover, make sure to let me know by leaving me a comment down below. If you guys are new to this channel, welcome, bienvenidos. I hope you guys can hit the subscribe button down below so you guys can join the familia. I also want to give a quick shout out to memberships, which we just launched on this channel, and I also wanted to shout out my second channel, which is my mystery thriller fictional channel. The first video is going up this spooky Sunday, so make sure to go check out the second channel and subscribe and hit the notification button so you can be notified on Sunday when the video goes live. But all right, familia, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you once again so much for being here, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, familia.